Hi, welcome to Inapickleknitting. My name is Donna. I'm coming to you from Manassas, Virginia. Today is Wednesday, May 22nd, 2019, and this is a podcast about knitting and today a little bit of sewing as well. If you are joining me for the first time, I hope there's something today that you will find enjoyable or interesting. And if you've come back, thank you very much for coming back to see what I've been up to for these long several weeks. So I'll start off with my finished objects. My first finished object I'm going to have to show you as a picture from my project page. This is the Take the Chill Off shawl that I made, and it was made using Alexandra's Crafts yarn. This was a base that was 80% superwash merino, 20% silk, and it was a fingering weight called Twilight and Purple Rain variegated. So it was two different shades there, and I do still have a skeined up remainder. I did not use all 3 skeins of the yarn. So here's what it looks like. I had made this for my mother. She saw it when I was in Colorado visiting at a local yarn shop, Colorful Yarns in Denver, Colorado, or I think it's Littleton or one of the suburb areas there of the Denver area. And she saw the sample made up. They had the yarn, so I bought it and decided I would make that for her birthday, which was unrealistic. It was not enough time to make that size shawl for her birthday. I just didn't have enough time. So when that deadline came and went, I decided, well, this could then be for Easter, which was maybe a little over a week later. I think I had about a week extra. That didn't work out either, which was a shame because that would have been a nice time for it to arrive. So I finally settled on Mother's Day being the day that I would gift it, and I managed to get it done for that. And you think, well, that is spring and it's getting too late for a shawl, but just 2 days ago, my mother got 5 inches at her house, and some areas got even more snow. So it's not necessarily too late for that, but she appreciated it nonetheless, and all I can do is show you a picture. I will mention with this pattern that I struggled not with the knitting. It was a piece of cake. You had it memorized after there's an 18-row repeat. Had it memorized before I'd even finished that first repeat. So it was very easy to knit, very easy to follow those directions. However, it's a seamed ponchette, they call it, I think. So it's a shawl, but it's connected, so it goes over your head, and then it lays nicely. You don't have to try and close it up. You could leave it open, and you could use a shawl pin, or a few people with project pages seamed it together totally differently. But I was attempting to get it the way the sample had been, though I neglected to take a photo of that, and there was not a project page for that one on Ravelry. I read every project page that had any notes, found one where the knitter had the same problem I did. So she took it to her local yarn shop and then drew a picture of how this might have been done at the yarn shop when they were discussing how to put it together. And when I was still confused with mine because I made the large one, so it was just the small would have been about that deep maybe, and the large was deeper, and it just wasn't gelling with me. But then she actually took hers and pinned it with the little knitting safety pins, those little plastic ones, and took a picture of that, and that solved the problem. So I have to say of this pattern, easy to knit, good directions for the knitting. The assembly, this pattern lacks clear directions. It needs a schematic. They need an additional picture from the front of the shawl, not just the back of the shawl, because that helps you get an idea. And they need a picture of how it's laying there when you start to seam. So that's just for my 2 cents worth. Nobody asked me. but I struggled, and I know another knitter struggled, and thankfully she took those photos, and that helped me, and I did write to her on Ravelry and thanked her so much for doing that, because I don't know what would have happened. I couldn't go back to the knit shop. I'm in Virginia, and the knit shop's in Denver, Colorado, so I couldn't have done that. So glad to have that done. She's happy with the gift. It finally made a gift appearance. Other things that I finished my April Desert Vista Dyeworks socks, and here they are. I did a slip stitch heel flap, heel turn and gusset, my normal short 2x2 rib. I did use a contrast color. This colorway was called Dahlias, and I used 72 stitches, as I am doing pretty much all the time now. My gauge is about 9 stitches per inch, sometimes a bit tighter, and that makes a good fit for me, especially when it's a heel flap. Then it fits over my high arch much more easily. So that's a finished pair of socks. And then I believe I had shown this yarn from Knitterly Things, and I finished these socks. The sock set came with this dark black that has some little dots of gray in it, mini skein. It's a 20-gram mini skein, and I cannot get heels, cuffs, and toes, even though I use a really short cuff, and I did an extra short one on this. I can't get all 3 with 20 grams. So I decided to just use the striped, and this was the first one that I did, and then I decided on the second one, while I had plenty of yarn and could have matched it, I just decided to do the stripes going the other way, or a different way, and so I have matching socks, but the heels don't match. That was totally intentional, and I'm just fine with it. I really like this colorway. This is from Knitterly Things, and it was called Ultimate Rainbow. I did not bring any of the stuff over, I guess, because I finished these so long ago, shortly after I did my last podcast. What else have I finished? Besides that, I've got things kind of mixed up here, I think. The shawl, 2 pairs of socks. As you can see, I'm a little rusty. And I finished some dishcloths. I'll have to put pictures here of some of the ones that I finished. I have given them all away. They all were set for particular people, for particular events. I'm now working on another set that is intended for a friend, but not for a particular event. So I did hold on to them, even though I had finished. And this is a set of 3 with, this is Louleigh Sugar and Cream, the yarn that you can find so readily in the U.S. at Michael's, Joann's. I think AC Moore might have it as well. And I'm using the Granny's Cloth Revamped, a free pattern on Ravelry. Very easy to memorize, works up quickly. For me, it always takes me about 2 hours if I actually sit and add the time up. But I have a variegated, and then this orchid and the blue, which are colors in here. Now I am working on, well, but I did not bring it up here. I'm working on, and just finished this morning, I just haven't woven in the ends, this, it's called Mod Green, but it's, to me, it's a jade green, and I might put that one with this set. I haven't decided yet. So that, because that color also goes with another yarn, so I haven't decided if I'm going to just make a set of 4 or put the green one with another color that it goes with. So that's it for what I finished, even though it's been quite a while when it came to knitting. That's what I finished. And what am I working on? So I'm working on several things. I will start with a shawl that I just started. I have participated in the Curious Handmade Shawl Society. I did the first year. This is a pattern set. It's an ebook that you purchase in advance before seeing any of the shawls, but once a month you get a different shawl pattern. This is from Helen Stewart of Curious Handmade. And I did the entire first year, did the 6 shawls, and then the Shawl Society 2, I did 6 shawls. Then last year I purchased the Shawl Society 3, but I actually never made any of them. And I think I was just maybe a little done with shawls right then, and all of the ones in the Shawl Society 3 were larger shawls using up to 3 skeins of yarn. I remember starting with the first one and going through my stash and just not finding anything I thought was going to work. So I decided to just not do that one, and then it just kept on. So I didn't do any of them last year. This year I thought, well, maybe I won't even do it because last year I bought it and didn't do any of them. But then I waited until the day before, and then just it was going to be released, and I just thought, oh, what the heck, I'm going to do it, because I went through my yarn and I thought, if there's a two skein shawl, then I have 2 skeins that I want to use. So I am working on the first one. It was just released beginning of May, and it's called Sea Gleam, and there you see the shawl. You can see it's a lot of eyelet lace and some other type lace at the bottom. It takes a little less than 2 skeins, and as you can see, Helen Stewart, she used a Suburban Stitcher yarn, which I could not find that color. I think maybe it was done for a special event or something, but when I saw this, I thought I really like the color. Went over to Suburban Stitcher, and she didn't show that as one of her colors, so I thought, well, I'm going to go to my stash because that's what I wanted to do anyway, and decided on using some yarn from Adelaide Cottage. It is called Louleigh's Dream. It's on her Golden Twinkle base, which is a fingering weight yarn, and it has gold sparkly stuff. I don't know if it's stellina, if it's gold. And you can see it has some mauve maybe, and some apricot, and a lighter than apricot shade. Every once in a while there's a little bit darker of this mauve, and I really like the colorway. So I have 2 skeins, but I got them at 2 different times. The first one came when I was part of a Gilmore Girls club that Shauna from Adelaide Cottage ran. It came as I think once every month for a couple of months, and each one had a stitch marker. This is called Louleigh's Dream, and it comes from an episode of the Gilmore Girls. Later, I bought one as a resale on Ravelry, and when I looked at the 2 skeins, I actually thought they were exact, but then when I put them in the ball, this one seems a little peachier. But I decided that because this shawl's in 3 sections, I'm doing the first section in 1 skein. I'm going to do this section in the other skein, so I'm going to change. And then I'm going to do the lace in the first color. Because if it looks different, I think it'll look very intentional. I think even that right here, this color seems lighter on here. So that with the different patterns, I think it's going to work with slight variation with as you expect to find in indie dyed yarns. So let me show you. I'm a little past 10%, so I'm getting close, but maybe like 6 or 7 rows away from starting section 2. So I'll change yarn then. Let's get it on the front. So this is the front. I have about 140 stitches maybe on here now. And it's always so hard to see a shawl. I mean, this will block out, and there, maybe you can get an idea. I will try to take a picture of it, but it's hard to get the lace spread out in a picture unless I pin it or actually block it. I don't really want to do that. So that's what I'm working on now. I'm not going to be in any kind of a rush for that. If I used to make sure that I was done before the next pattern came out, but I'm really not going to go there this time. The next thing I'm working on right now are my Desert Vista Dyeworks socks for the month of May, and I decided to use the colorway I had ordered called Just for Mom, since Mother's Day is in May. I don't have the first finished socks on a sock blocker, but I'll show you here. I'm just doing all one color, and I like the way the heel flap turns out, starting back with the purple, so it blends right in, because I started my heel flap here with the change of color. so you get the bigger stripes, and then it someplace right at the end of the heel turn, it starts to switch to the darker color, and I picked up my stitches, and so it runs right into the purple. It's worked out that way a couple of times on these self-striping socks for me, so I'm finding that makes me happy, and I think it looks fine. It's nice to do a contrast, but when you do it this way, you only have 2 ends to weave in, so that's nice. And again, 72 stitches, size 1 needle. My gauge is about 9 stitches per inch. I am working on the second one right now. I'm ready to put the heel flap because I'm right at the color change here from the light purple to the dark. So the heel flap is going to go on this side right here, and hopefully they will be a matching pair. I did, as I was knitting the first sock, I thought, this colorway, do I already own this colorway? Because these colors were just striking me as so familiar, the greens and the purples and the whites. And then I was digging through one of my fabric drawers a week or so ago, and I found out why. I had scraps of this fabric, and I thought, oh, I have to make a bag out of that, but I didn't have enough fabric left to make the bag. So I went on Etsy, where I had not bought it at Etsy. I bought the fabric at a local quilt shop, but I went back there and they didn't have either of the prints, either this one or this one, but they did have another one. So I bought some of the other one, but I really wanted the stripe. And then I just decided to make a totally different bag without a pattern. I wanted to make something that would snap at the top. So I just kind of put together this little bag. It hangs more like a purse. It's got a great big square bottom, but I thought the snap would be handy. I did put a zipper pocket inside for everything. So that's my Desert Vista Dyeworks socks for the month of May, and I've got to get them done, but today's the 22nd, so I still have 9 days, and it's just heel flap down the foot and the toe, and I'll be done. The next thing that I'm working on is another pair of socks. And I started these socks because in April I'd finished the April Desert Vista Dyeworks socks. I'd finished the rainbow socks I was working on. And I thought, I just really, really want to get through that commercial sock yarn that I have. So I picked out one of my skeins of sock yarn that is a commercial one. This is Louleigh. I have heard someone who is German say this, and she said JaWoll. I'm not sure. So I don't know if it's JaWoll for Americans or what. But it is a charcoal gray. It has pops of a hot pink, this minty green, and this chartreuse or neon green color. I have finished one sock. Here it is. I did a heel flap and gusset, but I decided to do the purl bump ridge along either side of the heel flap. And then I was kind of sorry I did it, but you know what, they're fine. I didn't do any contrast. I really didn't have a contrast color that would go with this. And so just decided it's a stockinette heel flap, just as I did on my Desert Vista Dyeworks socks, so just to do it as a stockinette. So this is my first one. The second one is barely started, and they're not going to match because it's just this kind of a pattern. It's not a stripe, so it doesn't bother me. It doesn't necessarily look matchy even if you match it up. And I like matching. So that's another pair of socks that I'm working on. I've got my little notes here. Fourth thing is my Northeasterly blanket. Now, I haven't worked on this in a while because I had reached 3 strips and thought, okay, I'm going to podcast pretty soon, and I don't want, it'd be easier to show if it's not in the middle of one of the stripes. And then I didn't podcast. So it's just been sitting there, for which I feel really bad. But now I can pick it up and get going on it. Let me hold up what I have. Okay, maybe like this. You can see the 3 stripes start to transition here, and then at the top you don't finish each strip off. you just put in some waste yarn, and then that means you really could come back and add to it if you wanted to, if you decided it wasn't long enough. I stopped kind of, it's not short really because it's a lap blanket, but it's a little bit short. I just was worrying about my yarn, so I thought, well, I'll make it just as short as I can, and then I can go back and add on later if I have enough yarn. But of course I want to get the width first. I am using what I and other people call a magic cake, where I tied together lots of bits of the Harry Potter themed yarn, and I'm not going to go into all of that about, this is a Harry Potter themed blanket. It's a knit along being run, or make along being run through Adelaide Cottage podcast, and it was also being co-hosted with Vegan Jilly from the Knitting Broomstick, but she is no longer, due to life circumstances, she's no longer podcasting, so this is too much right now for her. So I think Shauna's just taken it all on. I have a couple more, not that one, a couple more magic cakes, and if I need more, I will have to get some more yarn. I'm holding it double with this color, which is called Mrs. Norris. It's a yarn from, again, Shauna at Adelaide Cottage. It's on her toasty sock base. And she did, I started off with just 2 skeins. I don't know what I was thinking. I was brain dead when I thought that was going to work. But she did tie 3 more skeins for me. So I've got 5, and so the yarn could still be a problem, but I think I'll be fine. That's just where my blanket's going to be. I'm knitting this using these metal DPNs. Ultimately, I went with these Hiya Sharps, because I find something really sharp is really necessary, holding the 2 skeins together and some of the stitches that you do, you know, the knit 2 togethers and things like that. This is a pattern by, I'll pull it out and show you, called the Northeasterly blanket. Get it to the cover here. I'm not as prepared, obviously, as I should be. By Scandinavian. This is on Ravelry. It is a paid-for pattern. She has some tutorials to help you with different bits of this if you struggle. So if you want to know about the Harry Potter blanket, go over to the Ravelry group for Adelaide Cottage podcast, and you can read about it there. There are threads in there, and the blanket pattern is available on Ravelry. So I can now get back to working on that. And I just found something I've been looking all over the house for. I have these little things. This is kind of a dirty one. It's to help you get jar lids off, and that's what you use them for. But I find they really help me when I'm using this thing, whatever it's called, that holds your yarn. If you're using from the outside, you can sit it on a table, but this slides. Plus, sometimes this little post sticks out a little bit. I don't want to scratch my tables, so I sit it on this, and it doesn't slide on the table. So that's my handy hint for the day if you have that same issue as I've had. So Northeasterly, and otherwise works in progress. I'm really not working on anything right now in the way of knitting. Let's talk about what I've been sewing, because I've sewn some small little projects that I've been having fun with. For some reason, that's just really appealed to me, to do some fun sewing things. So I sewed the bag that I showed you. The first sewing project that I have worked on is this little trash can. It's a pop-up trash can. So it has a spring inside, and you can sew into it a little band with Velcro or elastic that would hold it down. But I don't travel to sew, so it didn't seem like it would be necessary for me. But I liked making it. It was really fun and easy, and just sitting it by the sewing machine to throw my threads in. This was a kit, so it has all the directions, but it came with that spring. And it also came with a piece of elastic you could sew in. And I got it from my local yarn shop, Susie's Quilts, and not much else I can say about it. If I want to make it again, I'm going to have to buy another kit or find a place where you can buy the springs. Didn't see that, but that was a fun little quick project, and making a few hours in an afternoon. And another little thing that I made that was also fairly quick is a pattern that I purchased a while ago called Notions Case. And this is a Louleigh pattern, so you'd have to go to her website. She also has a podcast. And from there you purchase the pattern and download it and print it out. So you get a PDF file that you print as your pattern. And it makes this little Notions pouch. It has a magnetic closure. You could use another type of closure, I believe, some kind of a snap you could probably use. But when you open it, it makes a little box. So it's been closed for a bit here, sitting here waiting for me to podcast, but you can get it to pop up and put your stuff inside of it and see everything that's in there. Let me see if I can. Now, she's in Great Britain, and she recommended a particular interfacing, a stiff one that I didn't have access to. I looked on Amazon, actually it was available, but you had to buy so much of it and it was very pricey, and I just thought, I don't really want to buy that, not knowing if I'd be able to use as much as you had to buy in the future. But I thought this was a clever little design, and it was a lot of fun to make and very quick again. So that's something that you don't have to find the pattern at a shop. You can do that online if you're in a place where you might not have access to it. The next thing that I made was also a pattern that I picked up from Susie's Quilt Shop, and it is the Clam Up Zippered Pouch, and this is by Annie.com. Annie's has a web store where you can purchase lots of materials to make all kinds of patterns and bags, and she does videos. This pattern came with a coupon code to download and watch a video that she made that shows every important step, or any place somebody might struggle, even some places where you probably wouldn't. It doesn't show absolutely everything, how to do, how to cut your fabric, or how to, sew a seam or something. But it does give you the important points, and it was a really good video. I watched it before making the bag, and then when I got to a certain point, I went back and looked again, because I'd looked at it a couple days later, I thought, I want to watch again how she did that. And this is the little pouch that I came up with. It has little tabs here to hold on to, and she suggests you make it with a zipper that opens both ways. It has little pieces of fabric here to hold the contents inside, so it opens up really wide and doesn't drop all of your stuff out. So this is a little Notions pouch. I did use the recommended stabilizer, which is Annie's Soft and Stable, I think it is. Here it is in the container, Soft and Stable, and I purchased this two different ways. The first time I bought it off of Amazon, and this bag I purchased at my quilt shop. It is a foamy, let's see if I can show you. You can see it's got a knit, I don't know if you can see. This is a knit fabric, and the other side is, but in between it's foam. So it makes a sturdier bag than some other products, quilt batting or whatever. It just can't stand up as well as this stuff, and it's really easy to sew through. So I have used that in bags before, not often. It's not as inexpensive as quilt batting, so you don't use it everywhere. But it does have a finished edge inside, mainly just by sewing down the zipper. And you use this kind of zipper by the yard, and put all your little heads on. Lots of videos for how to do that. You can purchase zipper by the yard at Joann Fabrics, actually, but not in very many colors. And it's not with the zippers. It's back in the area, I believe, where like the curtain hardware is. Some of those shearing tapes and things, and some of the cording you might use to make piping. It's back in that section, but just a few colors. You can buy it online, and you can buy it at some quilt shops because it's good for handbags. I do like using that for handbags. One, because there are a few more colors available. it's time now for our children's literature book that has fiber-related content. And I have two books today. One is not really fiber-related, except it's about sheep, and it was a cute little book I checked out from the library, so I thought I'd share it with you before I have to take it back. This is Simpson's Sheep Won't Go to Sleep, and it is by Bruce Arant. I really like the illustrations in this book. They're very simple but effective. There's a texture to them that I don't know how they were done, but that straw hat almost looks like it was chalk over a rough surface. The story is told in verse, and it is a story of Farmer Simpson, who is so tired because he works really, really hard, and he needs to sleep at night. And all of his animals go down to sleep at night except for the sheep, and they have trouble falling asleep. The author obviously is a father of children because he knows all of their pranks. I'm going to read you a little bit of it. But they all have excuses why they can't lie down or even try. They think of every reason why to stay awake beneath the sky. It sometimes makes poor Simon weep. This time of night, he needs his sleep. And it goes on, and then to compound his trouble of not having enough sleep, he remembers today's his wife's birthday, so he goes to the store, and while looking to find her nightgown, he spies some blankets. So that night at bedtime, 8 o'clock, he gently covered up his flock with cozy blankets, soft and snug, as comfy as a mother's hug. And they do get their good night's sleep, as does everyone else. So I really enjoyed this book. The second book is more of what I usually have to share, My Incredible Knitting Nana by Rowena Blythe. And this book is from Great Britain. I didn't do any research. I just know from the spellings, and they refer to sweaters as jumpers, so it was obviously not written in the U.S. It tells about this Nana who knits all the time, and when I read those lines to Cooper, he laughed. My Nana loves to knit. She just can't help herself. She knits me warm woolly jumpers, hats and gloves and scarves that cover my head, and on and on and on. One tiny little thing, and I don't think this is a British spelling for knit and purl, P-U-R-L, but that purl is spelled P-E-A-R-L here, which is like the pearl necklace. So I've never seen it written that way anyplace else. I don't know if that was an editorial thing, but Nana learns that in Antarctica there are cold penguins, and she decides to travel down there and knit warm things for them. But she ends up knitting warm things for all of the really cold creatures down in Antarctica, and then heads around the world and starts knitting around the world. She's obviously incredible. And gets to one point where the whole earth looks like a ball of wool. And then we have an open up page section because it starts to rain and rain and rain, and all these knitted things start to shrink when they get wet. And so to prevent everything from being trapped in tiny, tiny things, they start pulling out all of the wool from all of the things that she's made. So it's a cute little story, My Incredible Knitting Nana. I hope you enjoy. We have reached over 6,000 subscribers, which is absolutely wonderful and incredible. I think to celebrate that, I would like to make a notions pouch and fill it with some notions for a lucky winner. To win, if you would use the comment section below and tell me what you'd like to find in a notions pouch, that will be your entry. And before the next podcast, I will draw a winner. I'm going to allow the winner to choose which style of notions pouch they would like. I'm going to offer the Clam Up bag, which I showed you earlier. So it's about that big inside. Or this one, which was just called Notions Case by Louleigh, that lays rather flat but opens up into a box. Or my own design, which is a simple Notions pouch. And I will offer a variety of fabrics as well, or maybe I just will say a couple of colors. I don't know how I can how I can do it, but we will figure that out as I find someone as a winner. So again, if you would like to win that drawing, use the comment section below and hit the like button too. That's always helpful, gets the podcast out there in YouTube video land someplace, somehow. So thank you so much for subscribing. And now for the little segment at the end that I've been doing recently, and that is but nobody asked me, or nobody asked me, but I'm going to tell you anyway what I think. I showed you some dishcloths that I had made, and I started with the variegated and had, I think I just had the blue and I had ordered the green. But I wanted this color. It's rather kind of an orchid color. The only way to get that color was to purchase this particular skein, which is again Lily Sugar and Cream, but you'll see it says that it's scented. Why? Why would they do that? Not everybody likes the same scents, and I am very sensitive to smells of any kind. I can get a headache like that. I can get physically ill from smells. This smell was not good. I could tell when I picked up the skein, but I needed that color, and I went 3 places and couldn't find it except in this scented. So I thought, oh, that's fine. It does say it wears out with wash. I took it out of the little mini ball that they're wrapped up into, put it on my Swift, washed it, rinsed it, washed it again, just in the sink like you do yarn when you're dyeing yarn, just letting it soak and then, up and down with it. Let it dry, wound it up, started today with it. It still smelled. I can still smell it here, but it's not terrible, but I don't like it. It'll make me sick if I smell it too much. Why do they do that? Who necessarily wants something that they're giving to someone else to smell like that? I don't, so I just found that really odd, and I won't buy it, except I will if that's the only way I can get the color that I want, because as a knitter, color is something that drives what I'm doing a lot of the time. So that's nobody asked me about scented yarn, but I'd appreciate it if they'd stop it. I am working on some other things. I had last year sometime shown everyone that I was working on this quilt, a twin size quilt for my grandson for his bed here at our house. And I finished it all, was ready to put the strips around the edge, the binding strips, so that it makes it a little bit bigger and frames it, makes it look prettier. And I ran into a little snag. When I'd originally purchased the fabric that I wanted for the binding, that's the binding on his crib size quilt, I couldn't get more of the fabric, but I had made a dust ruffle for the crib and some curtains out of the fabric. So I decided, well, I took the dust ruffle off the crib. It had already been put away. Took the dust ruffle off and measured it out, and there was enough. And I had even put everything out a certain way, because that dust ruffle had been gathered, so it was longer fabric than you'd think. Yet when I went to actually cut the strips and get everything ready, I was going to have to piece the strips, and I didn't think I was going to have to. And that stopped me. I got frustrated, and I put it away. And then once something's put away, taking it back out doesn't always cross your mind. It crosses my mind if I see it, or I think, oh, I've got to do that quilt. But I just couldn't get over that step. Well, I finally just decided this has to happen. This is going to happen now. And it took me about an hour. Why I let an hour's worth of work just to, cut it and then piece it together. Why I let that stop me, I don't know. Are you like that? Do you let little things stop you and then you just get stalled in your process? I do it, unfortunately, far too often. So I'm glad I did get it out. There's been other little snags, but I think it's all going to work out. I have the backing, which I'm doing with Minky, and then the batting is down. The sandwich is made with the quilt top on it, and I've pinned it together, and I'm going to try to quilt it myself. Even though I did find a place that I could get it quilted that's nearby, I just thought, you know, with this, at this point, I think I'm just going to try and quilt it myself with the machine. We'll see how that goes. That's really what's in the back of my mind most of the time, is mentally thinking through that process. I have to mentally think through quilting projects, because while I've sewn an awful lot, I don't quilt an awful lot. The concept seems simple, but you know, it's really not. There's a lot of step-by-step details that should happen in a certain way. So I'm in the process of thinking through that. And otherwise, I'm not up to much of anything but just life. A little over 2 months ago, I was asked by the podcast and pattern designer Katrina's Creations if I would like to participate in a tag that she was going to be doing with some other podcasters called My Favorite Things, or My 10 Favorite Things. And I said, yes, I would like to participate. So in order to do that, I will be sharing right now 10 of my most favorite things that I've knit, and I will put a picture up here and try to explain why they're my favorite. And I will also then be linking below the video and the little pull down menu links to other podcasters who are participating in this same tag. So if you would like to maybe be introduced to some new podcasts, or even see podcasts that you already are familiar with talking about their 10 favorite things, you can then follow those links. So I'll get started, and I'm going to go in reverse chronology from when I made these items, and probably cover the screen here with the picture, or more than one if possible, pictures of the objects. So the first thing that's my favorite is called, I called Baby Sweater on my project page. And this was a little sweater and matching hat. And I think I even did make some booties for my grandson. I made this before he was born. It's a little cardigan that buttons up. It's a Sirdar pattern, and it was made with Sirdar Snuggly Baby Speckle yarn, which, if I remember correctly, is a cotton yarn. So that was my first favorite thing. My next favorite thing is also something that I made for my grandson before he was born, and that is a baby's blanket. And it is hopefully being shown right now. It is blue, and it is a favorite because he's still using it. It doesn't look like this at all, but he is still using it. The yarn is James C. Brett Flutterby Chunky Yarn. I had 2 skeins of that. It is a chenille yarn. It has held up, considering how much washing it's been through, constant laundering, and he has slept with it every night. So that's why it's a favorite. The next favorite I have is a pair of Scandinavian Spots mittens. This was the very first color work project that I did. I'd done some in color work with slipping stitches, but this is the first thing where it was stranded color work. It was done, I'm going to link to the project page, because when I keep flipping back and forth, I'm losing my place here. So I do remember it was a cascade yarn. There were 2 colors, a gray and then a multi-variegated color. This pattern came out of one of the Cascade books, 60 Projects, those type books. They have a lot of those books. The next favorite thing that I made is my Aranami Shawl. Here's a picture of this. I made this not as my first shawl, but I think I'd only made 1 or 2 before this. It's done pieced as a modular, so you make a little motif and then you attach the next one to the previous one, and on and on and on. This was made with Black Trillium Fiber Studio Lilt Sock Yarn. It did take about 900 yards of that fingering weight yarn, and as you can see, it was a gradient. This was a gray gradient. If you there's ways you can purchase your yarn and you could make 2 of these shawls. The other one would be in the reverse direction, and it's also a shawl that you could have made an extra row. You started with 1 and you ended up with the long part at the end. You could have added an extra row if you had an extra gradient color, and that would make it even a larger shawl. My next favorite is called Radiant Gradient. It's a boomerang shawl, and I did it with Done Roving yarn in the, it was called Frolicking Feet DK Gradients in the Quoddy Bay, or I don't know how to say that. I hope Quoddy Bay. And I knit it with 1 skein. It comes already in a cake, and I used the beginning and the end, and so it changes color throughout the skein anyway, but then because these colors, it has slip stitches, the way the colors cross each other, it makes an interesting pattern. If you go to that patterns, and again, I'll have a link to all these that I show you. If you go to that pattern, you will see lots and lots and lots of different versions. Bigger ones, I only did a single skein of DK, so mine is really more like a little scarflet, and that's how I've used it. My next favorite thing is a scarf, and it's called Noro Stash Busting Noro Scarf. This pattern, when I did it, I didn't even know who Andre Sue was, but it was created by Andre Sue Knits, and I later learned of her. I used Noro Hanabataki yarn. It took 2 skeins, and then I also used a Plymouth Galway Sport yarn in black. So you alternated black and with the Noro, which the Noro was repeating. So I had 2 entire repeats because I used 2 skeins, and I just loved the contrast in this, and I loved that when I finished it, my dear friend Jean liked it, and I gave it to her, so I was really pleased with that. The next favorite thing that I have is another little baby sweater that I made, and this is called Seamless Yoked Baby Sweater. I knit it in Debbie Bliss Baby Cash Merino yarn, and I made a matching little hat and a pair of shoes. I mean, they're little kind of booty shoes, so I will be showing that in a picture too. And then this again I made for one of my friend Jean's daughters for her firstborn child, and it's just a favorite because it was I thought it was very sweet. My next favorite finished object is another shawl that I made, and this is called Sprite's Fen. It was a Shawl Society 2 shawl. I had a gradient set from Seven Sisters Arts. It was a meridian gradient set. The color was marine tonal shift, so there were some aquas, and it went from dark to light. I beaded a part of the shawl. I beaded, even though the pattern didn't call for it, so I was kind of happy with myself for venturing out and doing something that I had not done before, and that's like just go for it on my own. And that's Sprite's Fen. My next favorite is another Shawl Society shawl. It's again from the 2nd season, and it is the Villa Wrap. And I just like this because the colors appeal to me so much. I used Ba La Jolla yarn in 3 different colors, the Pretty in Pink, Gray Onyx, and La Perla, which is the cream color. And I just love the way that this turned out for some reason. And I believe we're up to number 10 now, and so I'm going to share my 10th favorite thing is my Coziest Memory Blanket, patterned by Kemper Ray. And this was made entirely from, well, either little minis that I'd purchased or scraps of yarn from other projects. And I like it because it took me the longest. It's the physically largest thing I've ever knit from fingering weight yarn. And I really like my the I-cord binding that I put around it, and I like it as a useful object. So those are my 10 favorite things. If you want to find out what some other podcasters' favorite things are, check out the links below. And this is again due to the brainstorm of Katrina from Katrina's Creations, and she sells patterns. You might remember that I knit her unfurled shawl last year, and I'll show that here. And you can go to her site and find many other lovely patterns. And you may well be wondering, why did it take me so long to get back here? And I will tell you that podcasting is something that, for me, is a lot of work, and it's also stressful. Not stressful to do it, it's just stressful to have enough to show you. And I find sometimes that's driving what I do rather than me driving what I do. Like, what I want to do driving what I'm doing. And as someone who is, one, retired, two, I knit just to make stuff. I give most of it away. I make a lot of socks. I hardly wear them. I've made a lot of shawls. I give them away. I hardly wear them. I just like doing it. It's process for me, and so it's something that I want to do, but it is stressful when I feel like, well, I really better knit something different, because that's kind of boring to just keep doing socks. Even though in my heart, that's a happy place for me. Doing these dishcloths, it's a happy place for me. It's boring probably, but I always do it in the morning while I'm over at my daughter's waiting for my grandson to wake up so that we can get our day started. It can take me a week to finish it, but it's just, I don't have to think at all, and I don't know, it's just my happy place. But I feel like what I make is getting boring to anybody who'd want to listen. And so that stops me a little bit. It is a lot of work. And also, you know, I only have my 3 mornings. I've had to, and I do work. I do 20 days a year in my retirement. And mine's actually more like 40 because I only do mornings. So that's one of my mornings. I'm done with that now. And I just have found time hard to find, and motivation hard to find, and trying to keep it a happy place with my crafting and not a stressful place where you're saying, okay, yeah, she showed dishcloths last time. She's always knitting a pair of socks. Oh, geez, another shawl. And I don't want to feel like I ought to be doing something else. And I know some nice people are going to come back, which you don't have to do, and say that's okay. But it feels different on this side, trying to do that. And then when you don't do it for a while, it's a little bit hard to get right back in there. It's like you got to stay with it all the time to keep it natural. So hopefully, now that I've broken the ice here, I thought I'd get it filmed today and edit tomorrow, which I never do. I always do it all in one day, and it feels like a lost day almost, because that's all I've done. So that's my excuse. I'm sticking to it, and if you stuck through this long, I do appreciate that you've watched, and if you already gone, you're not hearing me, so that's okay. Anyway, nice to be back with you, and I hope you have fun with whatever you're making. Bye-bye.